dance floor. Right in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the floor. Twerking it on the dance 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 floor. Right in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the dance floor. Right in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the dance floor. Right in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the right in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the dance floor. Right in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the floor. Twerking it on the dance 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 floor. Right in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the dance floor.
Dum 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 dum, dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum, dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum, dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum,
Back just in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the dance floor. Back just in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the, twerking it on the. Back just in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the dance floor. Back just in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the floor.
Twerking it on the dance floor. Twerking it on the dance floor. Twerking it on the dance floor. Twerking it on the dance floor. Twerking it on the dance floor. Twerking it on the dance floor. Back just in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the dance floor.
Back just in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the dance floor. Back just in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the, twerking it on the. Back just in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the dance floor. Back just in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the floor.
Twerking it on the dance floor. Twerking it on the dance floor. Twerking it on the dance floor. Twerking it on the dance floor. Twerking it on the dance floor. Twerking it on the dance floor. Back just in front of that mirror, girl, you twerking it on the dance floor.
Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum. Dum 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 dum.